Critical planning activity in the design and implementation of your Microsoft 365 services is planning migration of your users and of your data. When you're planning your migration, you typically want to start by identifying the data that's going to be migrated. Some questions to ask include, what on-premises data is actually critical to your organization? As I mentioned before, most organizations have a lot more data on-prem than they actually need or want to keep. They just haven't bothered to clean it up. Also, what data needs to be moved from the on-prem environment to Microsoft 365 versus what data is going to remain on-prem? And importantly, where is the data currently located? For example, your migration plan is going to be very different if the data is on users' individual hard drives or if it's on a file share. Having determined what's going to be migrated, of course, you have to figure out how it's going to be migrated. One tool you might use is the SharePoint migration tool. We're going to see an example of this later on in the class. It allows for migration to SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams from on-prem instances of SharePoint or SharePoint Foundation, or from network or local file shares. You can also use PowerShell to drive the SharePoint migration tool. You might also use the OneDrive Sync client, or of course, manual upload. Another important planning process is identifying users and mailboxes that are going to be migrated. Some things to consider here include which users are actually going to need cloud-based email, if there are any regulatory or compliance concerns with any of your users' email, if there are any geographical constraints, and a couple of other important things to consider. E1 mailboxes, E1 enterprise licenses are limited to 50 gig, and then you can fit another 50 gig in the archive mailbox for each user. For E3 and E5, the limits are 100 gig for the mailboxes, but up to 1.5 terabytes for the archive mailboxes. When you're planning your migration of on-premises users and groups, it's probably common sense, but it's worth noting that when you're looking at your users, you want to identify the ones that are active and determine whether the account should be migrated. There is a bulk import process available for cloud-only deployments. You can make a CSV file of user data and upload it and have all your users automatically created. And a couple things to consider when you're creating Microsoft 365 groups. Each group can have up to 100 owners. Each user can create up to 250 groups. You can have up to 500,000 groups per tenancy, and a user can be a member of up to 1,000 groups. One group can store up to 1 terabyte of data plus 10 gig per subscribed user, and the group mailbox can be up to 50 gig in size. For migrating your mailboxes, you have a number of methods available depending on your circumstances. For a simple cutover, you can just use the cutover method. This is quick, one shot, small number of users, or you can do a minimal hybrid migration for a small number of users where you use the hybrid configuration wizard to set up a hybrid configuration and then cut over in batches if you like, or all at once. You can also do full hybrid for larger numbers of mailboxes, which gives you more control. It allows you to run both on-prem and cloud-based for a while until everything is stable. And you can also do a staged migration, which is typically reserved for older versions of Exchange. Or in the case that you have a non-Exchange mail system, for example, SendMail or Outlook.com, you can use an IMAP migration to migrate all of your user mailboxes and user data. And we'll talk more about this later in the class, but broadly, if you want to do a small number of users with a modern version of Exchange, you're likely going to do a cutover migration. If you have an older version of Exchange, you'll probably use staged. If you have a larger number of users with a modern version of Exchange, you'll probably do a remote move migration and hybrid deployment. And as I said, anything non-Exchange, you'll use IMAP. One very straightforward way of getting user mail data into Exchange Online is to import the PST files from their local workstations. This allows you to move on-prem mailboxes into Exchange Online. A feature called Intelligent Import allows you to filter what gets imported, and along with making the mail available to the users themselves, it also enables compliance by making sure that the mail is available for discovery searches in Exchange Online. You can do this over the network, or for large volumes of data, you can ship hard drives directly to Microsoft. And in order to do this, you need to download and install the PST import tools. The organization management group has to be assigned the mailbox import-export role in Exchange Online. And as part of the process, you have to generate a SAS key to enable upload to Azure Storage. If you're doing uploading, of course, if you're doing shipping, you can skip that step. Now we're going to take a look at the process of importing PST files. This is going to be done by the Exchange Admin Center. So from the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, I'll go to the Exchange Admin Center. Here I have to be signed in as a member of the Exchange Admins group, which I am. And now I need to add a permission to one of the roles. Now, in this case, what I'm going to do, I could create a new role with these permissions. In this case, I'm going to use the organization management role, which, as you can see, as a global admin, I already belong to. What that means is that I already have the permissions associated with this, and one of the permissions that I need is this one, mail recipients, which has already been assigned. The other one that I need is mailbox import export. So I'm going to select that and save. And now I have to wait a while, up to 24 hours. Okay, enough time has passed now, so I can continue. This is going to be done in the Compliance Center. So here from the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, I'm going to go to compliance.microsoft.com, which is now Microsoft Purview. And here I'm going to go to Data Lifecycle Management and select Import. From the Import tab, I'm going to select New Import Job and give the job a name, and then click Next. And in this case, I want to upload my data. You can see we have as an option shipping hard drives to Microsoft, but in this case, I'm just going to upload it. And so in order to do this, I'm going to copy the URL that includes a key that's going to be used with Azure AZ Copy. What this is doing is it's allocating a storage location temporarily that I'm going to be able to upload to, and that storage location is identified by the SAS key. So here it is. I'll copy it to the clipboard and save it for later. Now, the next step I need to do is download Azure AZ Copy if I don't have it already. To do this, I'm going to click on this link, which brings me to the AZ Copy page, and I can go and pick the version that I want, and then extract it someplace useful, ideally someplace in the path. And this is going to allow me to run AZ Copy from a command prompt. So as you can see here in PowerShell, I'm running AZ Copy with the copy command. I'm copying out everything with a .pst extension from my source folder, and I'm using the URL that was provided that includes the SAS key. As you can see, it worked. I have 2 file transfers here, and now I can go and say I'm done uploading my files and I have access to the mapping file, and click Next. So the mapping file is a file that I have to make, which is a CSV file that describes how to transfer these PST files into mailboxes in my Exchange tenant. And here are the details. The CSV mapping file is going to have columns called workload, file path, name, mailbox, is archive, and target root folder. And you can see at the bottom there, that's an example of the sample mapping file that I'm using. So I'm going to select it here. And validate it. It's correct, so I'll click Next and Submit. And then I can click Done. And now the job is going to sit here and run, and I have to wait a little while longer. And now in the process of importing, I can decide if I want to filter my data. I'm going to say, yes, I do, so I'll say Next. And I only want to import data that's less than 1 year old. And I also want to import data. You can see I can specify age here, but I can also say I only want mail from certain users. I want to exclude certain users. I only want mail to certain users or certain users in the CC field. So I'll apply all of that and then click Next and Submit. And then I can click Done. And now I'm done. My PST files have been imported into my user mailboxes. The subject of lesson 2 is managing user identity and